Hello everybody, my name is Evelyn Garcia and today I'm going to be talking about Reaganomics. So basically Reaganomics was something that President Ronald Reagan in his term was a conservative economic policy that he implemented, which attacked the 1981 through the 1982 recession and stagflation. So basically, what is stagflation, right? So stagflation is an economic contraction combined with double-digit inflation. So basically, Reagan's position was dramatically different from the status quo, from the normal thing, right? So prior presidents before Reagan, such as Richard Nixon and Lyndon Johnson, had expanded the government's role. However, Reagan pledged to make cuts in four main areas. So these areas were, one, both income taxes and capital gain taxes. The other one was the growth of government spending. Number three, any regulation on businesses. And four, the expansion of the money supply. So let's talk about more what is Reaganomics? Like, what is it? So basically, Reaganomics is based on the Laffer curve. And the Laffer curve was first developed by economist Arthur Laffer, who developed it in 1974. So his last name Laffer, hence Laffer curve, right? So the curve basically showed how tax cuts should stimulate the economy to the point where the tax base expanded. So basically, when we think about tax cuts, they reduce the level of federal taxation immediately, like right away. So these same cuts have a multiplier effect on economic growth. And this effect can either be positive and negative, right? So tax cuts put money in consumers' pockets, which they spend. You have money in your pocket, you're going to go out and spend it, hypothetically, right? So that stimulates businesses' growth and there's more hiring involved. Now, what is the main result? Well, basically a larger tax base. So Reaganomics is consistent with the theory of supply-side economics. And what it states is that corporate tax cuts are the best way to grow the economy. So when companies get more cash or when they need to hire new workers and expand their businesses, that's when the whole positively benefiting the supply side economics comes in. So it also says that income tax cuts give workers more incentive to work, and this ultimately increases the supply of labor, which is why it's sometimes called the trickle-down economics, because when it starts with one person, it just kind of trickles down. So did the Reaganomics work? Well, President Reagan delivered on each of his four major policies, the ones I mentioned earlier, objectives, although it did work, not to the extent that he wanted it, and his supporters. So basically, he and his supporters had this idea of it working to a certain extent, but it didn't really meet that quota. So basically, according to William A. Niskanen, who was the founder of Reaganomics, who belonged to the Reagan's Council of Economic Advisors from 1981 to 1985, so 4 years, inflation was ultimately tamed, but it was thanks to the monetary policy, not fiscal policy. So Reagan's tax cuts did end the recession, but government spending wasn't lowered. It just shifted from domestic programs to defense. So the result of this was that the federal debt almost tripled from $998 billion in 1981 to $2.857 trillion in 1989. So that's definitely a big difference. As for the tax cuts, Reagan basically cut tax rates enough to stimulate the consumer demand. So by Reagan's last year in presidency, in office, the top income tax rate was 28% for single people who were making over $18,000. And anyone who was making less than $18,000 had paid no taxes whatsoever, which was much less than the 1980 top tax rate of 70% for individuals earning $100,000 or more. So Reagan indexed the tax brackets for inflation. And Reagan offset these tax cuts with tax increases in other places as well. So he also raised Social Security payroll taxes and some excise taxes along with that. And he also cut several deductions. He also cut the corporate tax rate from 46% to 40% to 40% in 1987. But the effect of this break was very unclear, because Reagan changed the tax treatment of many new investments. So it was hard to keep track of everything that he was changing. The complexity meant that the overall results of his corporate tax changes couldn't be measured. So, because like I said, he's doing all these things, so it's hard to keep track of what's working and what's not working. So within all this, the government spending still grew, but it just wasn't as fast under Jimmy Carter when he came into presidency. because Reagan increased spending by 9% a year from $678 billion at Carter's final budget in fiscal year 1981 to $1.1 trillion at Reagan's last budget for FY 1989. So Carter basically increased spending by 16% a year from $409 billion in fiscal year 1977 to $678 billion in fiscal year 1981. So Reagan made minor cuts to the discretionary programs in his first few budgets, which included the Department of Commerce, Education, Energy, Interior, and Transportation, but he did not cut Social Security or Medicare payments since they were protected by the acts that created them. So basically, let's see, guys. Reagan economics would not work today. The way I explained it, it would not work today whatsoever, because today conservatives prescribe Reagan economics to make America great again, hence our past president Donald Trump and the Republicans who advocated it as a solution to the economy's needs. But the theory behind Reagan economics reveals why what worked in the 1980s could harm growth today. The effect that tax cuts have depends on how fast the economy is growing when they are applied. And it also depends on the types of taxes and how high they were before the cut. The Laffer curve shows that cutting taxes only increases government revenue up to a certain point. For example, when George W. Bush cut taxes in 2001 and 2003 to fight the 2001 recession, the economy grew and revenues increased. Supply-siders, including this president, said that was because of tax cuts, and monetarists pointed to lower interest rates as a real stimulator of the economy. So the Fed lowered the Fed funds top rate from 6% at the beginning of 2001 to 1% in June 2003. So therefore, Reagan economics would not work today because tax rates are already low compared to historical levels of 70%. So that's a little information on Reagan economics. I hope I pronounced that word right. I feel like I pronounced it wrong. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something, and thank you for your time. I appreciate it.